Om Sahanau Bhavatu. Om Sahanau Bhavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvina Varitamastu. Tejasvina Varitamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. Let's begin. The Yoga Sutras book that I generally teach from is this one that is translated and has commentary by Swami Satchidananda. There are many really wonderful translations of the Yoga Sutras, and I recommend that you read multiple versions if this is a teaching that speaks to you. The reason I use this one is because it gives us the Sanskrit as well as the English pronunciation of the Sanskrit words with diacritical marks. And it defines each of the Sanskrit terms, Satchidananda does. And there are some places that I will give different translations for you. And then gives a nice summary of each sutra all together in English. Satchidananda's commentary follows. Okay. There are many wonderful translations. Some of them are very technical, very sort of intellectual in their analysis. But this translation gives a lot of really nice metaphors and stories to understand how to apply these sutras to our life. The first step is just paying attention to what's happening in the mind. Okay, when we sit in meditation with eyes closed, turning our senses inward, what is it that brings our mind into a distracted state? If we're focusing on something, maybe we're focusing on the heart or the third eye, or gazing at something, what is it that brings us out of that concentration? Well, we hear something from the outside, or a thought, right? We hear that inner voice. Or if we're visual, we may see something, ooh, flash of color, or we may feel something in our body. And so the idea then is whatever that experience is that the mind is brought to, is that we meet it, we go there to it, we notice that it's there, and we experience it from a place of non-judgment, all right? Because sometimes when our thoughts are reeling, and we're not, first of all, we're not paying attention. The mind is just sort of chattering along without us being aware. Or one thought happens and then it leads to another thought, which leads to another thought, and eventually we're in this sort of spiraling thought pattern. So the first thing that we need to do is be aware that we're thinking, okay? So, and that's really the science behind Patanjali's work here. So these ideas in the Yoga Sutras, they're not new ideas by any means. The Yoga Sutras presents a nice succinct version. It's 196 sutras that effectively summarize the teachings of the practice of yoga. Okay, and to understand the Yoga Sutras, it's good to have a little bit of background in Vedic philosophy as well as Sankhya philosophy. So I'm going to present those, and just to give you a little bit of a background understanding. So Vedic philosophy, we are introduced to the Atman and the Brahman. The Atman is the individual soul, which is part of the universal soul, which is the Brahman. Okay? And when I refer to the Atman and I place my hand over my heart, it's because the scriptures say, the teachings say, that the Atman resides in the heart. And when I go like this, and when I say Brahman, it's because Brahman is the universal consciousness that flows through everything. Okay? And so the Vedas even say that Atman is Brahman. So a nice analogy here would be if you had a big chunk of artist's clay, right? And this big piece of clay would represent the Brahman, right? The universal consciousness that flows through everything. This is the Brahman. And you pull a chunk of that clay off and you form it with a little head and shoulders and arms and a body, and you paint blonde hair and blue eyes, and then this little piece of this big chunk of clay then begins to identify with this separate form and develops this identity as a girl, as a yogi, as a mother, as Courtney, okay? And so even though what makes up this separate piece of clay is the same material that is what makes up the whole chunk of clay. So essentially there is no difference. They are the same thing. But this Atman, this appearingly separate thing, starts to develop an identity that's separate, okay? And that's where the term Atman comes from. So in the Vedas, the idea is that all is one and one is all, and there is no separation, but they give the term Atman to explain the individual soul. Okay? It's also like the Rumi quote, you're not just a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. Okay? So in that same way, the Atman is like the drop and the Brahman is like the ocean. Okay? So it's important to understand that before you get into the sutras, to know what Atman and Brahman are representing. And then the other part of the Vedic philosophy that I feel is really important to comprehend the Yoga Sutras is the idea of the koshas. And you may have gone through this already, so I'll just kind of go through it very quickly, is that the koshas are these energetic layers that you can almost think of as lampshades. So you have the light of the Atman inside, and then there's a lampshade around it, right? And so there's 5 of these koshas or veils that cover the inner light, that cover the understanding of the self as Atman, as Brahman. And so what are these koshas? Well, and why do we care? So the koshas go from the most gross, and gross meaning, what you can touch and taste and smell, to the most subtle layer, to our deepest layer, to our Atman, to our bliss body, okay? So very basically, the koshas are the physical body. So this, what we can touch, it's very gross. We can smell it, we can feel it. It's very easy to know that we have a physical body. This is your Annamaya kosha, your food body. This is where we practice the asana. And that's why so many of us have been drawn to yoga, is because we identify so strongly with the grossest layer of our being that, I like to say to my students that that's how we hook them, right? We hook them because, ooh, this makes my body feel good, right? And then later, you're breathing more deeply, and that's the next layer, is the pranamaya kosha. So it's a little bit more subtle than the gross physical body. It's the breath. You're breathing, right? You can't necessarily see it, maybe you can see the effect of it, like the wind and the trees, but it's a little bit more subtle. Okay, so from Annamaya Kosha, the physical body, to the Pranamaya Kosha, the breath body, to the Manomaya Kosha, which is the mental body. So again, we know we have a mind, but we can't necessarily point to exactly where the mind is inside of our head, nor can we see it or feel it or touch it, right? So it's even more subtle. But we know there's a mind there. Okay, and then beyond the mind, beyond the Manomaya Kosha, is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the intellect. Okay, now it's the intellect that is constantly discriminating between what's real and what's not real. Okay, what's truth and what's untruth, right? What is dark, what is light, yeah? What is our true self as Atman, and what is everything else, all of that stuff that's constantly changing, which we'll get to in a moment. And so from the Vijnanamaya Kosha that's constantly discriminating, eventually we get to the Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss body. Ananda means bliss, okay? And it's here in the bliss body that where the Atman resides, right? Where the highest form of unity, of connection, of love resides there in the bliss body, in the knowing of the self as the Brahman, as the Atman, okay? So much of what we do in yoga is traveling through these layers, right? So, even if we just think of an asana practice, we begin, how do we begin an asana practice? Well, how did I begin with you? I said, sit down, find a comfortable seat, get your body settled. Then I went to your breath and I said, notice that you're breathing. Right? And in an asana class, we might bring in Ujjayi breath or yogic breath. And then from there, we go to the mind. Okay, so body, breath, what's the mind doing? And in asana class, the dharana, the concentration is the breath, right? Because if the breath isn't there, then we're not doing asana anymore. We're just doing gymnastics. If the concentration and the breath aren't there. And so in this way, everything we practice in yoga is traveling through these koshas. When you look at the chakras, same thing. When you move from the root chakra, which is the one that establishes your safety in this external world, and you move up each chakra level, you get more and more subtle into the subtler layers of the self until, boom, the kundalini hits the sahasrara, or the crown chakra, and opens up to that marriage of the Atman and the Brahman, right, of the Shiva and the Shakti, okay? And Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga are no different. So he starts with very external, very gross understanding of concentration and of yoga, and he makes his way to more and more subtle aspects of ourself until ultimately there's samadhi, the meditative absorption. Okay, so we're going to see this pattern reflected in the sutras. Okay, one last thing to go over before we get into this is Sankhya philosophy. So Sankhya philosophy is a non-dualistic and dualistic and non-theistic philosophy. So dualistic meaning there's 2 ultimate realities. Okay, non-theistic meaning that there's no belief in a higher power, in a god. Okay? It's a philosophy. And why is it important? Well, because the Sankhya philosophy is the theory behind yoga, and then the Yoga Sutras are effectively the practice of that theory. Okay, so and then another really beautiful thing that Patanjali does is he does bring in the theistic option. So Patanjali doesn't limit his teaching to only people who don't believe in a higher power, right? But he opens it up to people that do believe in God or do believe in this transcendental soul that is all-knowing and all-seeing and omnipresent and so forth, right? So Sankhya philosophy, there are 2 ultimate realities. Those 2 ultimate realities are called Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti represents matter, and Purusha represents consciousness. Prakriti represents Maya, or illusion, and Purusha represents Brahman, or universal consciousness. Prakriti represents Shakti, the creative power, and Purusha represents Shiva, the ultimate yogi, the highest consciousness. Okay? And so this journey that we're in yoga, and remember I said we're discriminating, right? And so this discriminative faculty that we have is essentially discriminating between what is Prakriti and what is Purusha. Well, what is the nature of Prakriti? What is the nature of matter? Okay? So it's constantly changing. And this is going to be the biggest sort of telling factor especially when it comes to the practical application of our mind, right? So Sankhya philosophy says that our mind and our body are Prakriti, are matter, okay? And how do we know that? Well, because the body is constantly changing. The mind is constantly changing, right? One day you love this person, the next day you can't stand to be around them, right? Or our likes and our dislikes and our mind is constantly changing, the state of our mind. In one moment, we're in this state of elation, of joy, of just, ecstasy. In the next moment, we're just plummeting into sadness and depression, right? And so because of that constant change, we know that the mind is matter. It is Prakriti, constantly changing, right? And in opposition, Purusha is never changing. It's permanent, okay? It's a permanent reality. Prakriti or Maya is an illusion. It's not real, right? It's not our truth. It's untruth. Whereas Purusha is real. It is the truth, right? It is our highest truth because we are that consciousness. How do we know that? Well, because we can watch the movements of the Prakriti, yeah? Okay. So we are distinguishing constantly between these two. There is a mantra, maybe you've heard it. It's Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. And it's lead us from darkness to light, from death to immortality, right? Lead us from what is unreal to what is real. And that's what this mantra is talking about, okay? So the one other understanding that's good to have from Sankhya philosophy is that if we are to distinguish between Purusha and Prakriti, to calm our mind and to come into this evenness of mind, where we're not swinging from high to low constantly, then we need to understand the nature of matter. We need to understand the nature of the mind. Well, matter, Prakriti, is made up of 3 gunas, okay? Guna means rope. So you can imagine 3 strands of a rope wound up together. And these 3 gunas, they are what makes up all of matter. So they are what make up your mind. Okay, the 3 gunas are sattva, which is light, which is purity, which is anything that elevates your consciousness. Rajas, which is movement. It is busyness. It is acting with an expectation of a result. It's anything that's going to keep your level of consciousness right where it is. It's like a rocking chair, right? Gives you lots to do, but doesn't get you anywhere. This is rajas. Tamas represents inertia, stillness, dullness, doubt, laziness, sloth, sleep. Tamas is going to be what lowers your level of consciousness. Okay, so our mind is made up of these 3 factors. And when they're evenly balanced, then we are one with the Atman, we are one with the Brahman, we go back into the unmanifest, back into that state of oneness. But we are currently in a state where sattva is low and rajas and tamas are high. So we have periods or experiences or thoughts where we're very, very busy, very focused on getting something done, accomplishing a goal are rajas. And then we may go through periods of time or thought patterns where we are depressed and we're lying on the couch and we're doubting these truths that we are learning, right? And so then the point of yoga is to increase more sattvic thoughts, okay, until that balance comes back. And then even prakriti is transcended to go into the highest level of samadhi, which we'll talk about. Okay, so there's a background. Now, when you start to study the Yoga Sutras text, so the word sutra is like the English word suture or thread. And as I mentioned, there are 196 of these Yoga Sutras. And the sutra style of text is going to give you minimal amount of words, and they're going to pack in the maximum amount of meaning. So that's why, there's 196 sutras, but we have this whole book of Satchidananda's beads of wisdom that he's put on these threads, on these sutras, okay, to help us understand. The other quality of the sutra style text is that it's universal, okay, and it's not redundant. And so that's going to become important when we start studying the sutras one by one, to know that there is no repetition. So if something seems repetitive, we may need to dive a little deeper into it. Okay, so this is the style of this teaching. Now, the Yoga Sutras is split into 4 chapters or 4 books. The first book is the first and the 4th book, or the first and the 4th chapter, are focused for the advanced practitioner. So book 1 is Samadhi Pada, and book 4 is Kaivalya Pada, which is the highest level of enlightenment, of spiritual wisdom, of samadhi. Okay, it is ultimate freedom, or moksha, the liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Okay, so book 1 and book 4 are written and designed for the advanced practitioner who has already experienced some level of samadhi. And again, I'll explain that word in a little while. Book 2 is geared towards the beginning practitioner. So book 2 is sadhana pada. Sadhana means practice. And so it's in book 2 that you'll find the 8 limbs of yoga. You'll find how to practice yoga according to Patanjali. Book 3 is called Vibhuti Pada. And this one is all about these things called siddhis, which are kind of like superpowers that come along with the practice. Okay, Patanjali puts these in here for 2 reasons. One, they are signposts, like, hey, this could happen to you on this path of yoga. Okay, it's things like gaining the strength of an elephant, or being able to understand the thoughts of someone else. Okay, these sort of psychic powers that can come along. And so Patanjali is saying, okay, this can happen for one thing along this practice. So be aware of that. But second of all, don't get caught up in these, because these are like the sideshows. So if you're on your way to visit the king, and in the king's palace are all of the wonderful things, all of the bliss and all of the joy and all of the, the psychic powers are all there, but you're on your way there and you get distracted by one of these cities, by one of these superpowers, and then you lose your way because you go that way. And rather than staying focused towards the king's palace, and that's appropriate because this metaphor is appropriate because the Yoga Sutras has been accepted to mean Raja Yoga, and Raja Yoga is the king's yoga, or the royal yoga. It's the royal path. And my teacher says that Raja Yoga is the path where all of the other paths converge. Okay, and you see this reflected in all of the texts. In the Bhagavad Gita and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is teaching Arjuna all of these different paths. Right? There's the path of action. There's the path of knowledge. There's the path of meditation. But ultimately, it's all going to come to the path of meditation, which is Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is the path of meditation. And so all of the practices that we're doing are all in an effort to understand fully what Patanjali means in Sutra 1.2. So I'm going to begin there. So the first two sutra, the first sutra is Atta Yoga Anushasana. Atta is a mantric word, just like Om, and the sutra style texts always begin with Atta. Okay, so it's a dedication, it's a prayer, and it also denotes transition. So it means the word now, but not now in the sense that we're used to saying, oh yeah, now I'm going to do this, or now this happened, but now in the most presence way. So that now, that even when I say now, has already happened. So my teacher's master would say that one who does not meditate cannot understand the true meaning of now. Okay? And so with this Atta, with this now, he's saying, now the discipline of yoga. What does that now mean? It means that you are at a transitionary period in your life where, number one, you as a student are ready. Number two, the teacher, Patanjali, is the authority on this self-realization. Okay? And number three is the commencement of the teaching. So now we transition into this teaching. Now you are ready. Everything has led you to this moment, and here it is. Okay? Sutra 2 is the most important sutra. So if you do have the text with you, circle it, highlight it, put a star next to it. If you were to fully understand Sutra 2, you would not need to read any farther. But thank goodness he gives us another 194 or so other sutras to explain what he means. So let's take a look at Sutra 2. Sutra 2 says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. What does yoga mean? Okay. Sage Vyasa, who's the first to write commentary on the Yoga Sutras, says yoga is samadhi. You've heard me say this word a couple of times. For now, we're going to say it's meditative absorption. Okay. So Sage Vyasa says yoga is meditative absorption. Okay, it's the highest level of meditation, to where you are fully absorbed in the experience. If we break down the word yoga, we can bring it into its verb root, yuj and yujir. And this meaning means to connect, to unite, to yoke. And it's very interesting, this term to me, because it's a little bit misleading. Because what are we yoking? What are we uniting? So maybe you've heard connecting mind, body, and soul. As we get further in the Yoga Sutras, you'll see that really what we're doing is reuniting the Atman with the Brahman when it's never really separated. So our individual soul has always been swimming in the cosmic soup of amazingness that is Brahman. It never separated. There's only the illusion of separation, right? Because we're looking through our mind, it's like you're looking into a mirror at your own reflection, but that mirror has dirt all over it. Or it's one of those funhouse mirrors. And so when you look at your reflection, you're getting a distorted picture of who you are, right? That painted clay, oh yes, right, I'm a person, I'm a yogi, I'm a mom, I'm all of these things, all of these roles that I play. When really there was never any separation. You never were something other than the elements that make up that clay, right? So you always were the Brahmin. So this etymology of the word yoga has always been very interesting to me. And I think that when we bring our body and our breath and our mind into balance, into evenness, and maybe we are yoking that together, and then the Atman realizes itself as Brahman. We could say that the Atman is yoking or uniting with the Brahman, but truly it never was separate. So the word yoga. The next word is chitta. Chitta for Patanjali means the entire mind field. It means the ahamkara or the ego. It means the memories. It means the active analytical mind. It means the subconscious impressions. It means the emotions. The whole entire mind field is what Patanjali is referring to when he says chitta. Okay? The word vritti means fluctuation or modification or movement or revolution. So you can think of vritti as waves. So if you have the surface of a calm mind, then the vrittis, the thoughts, are the waves on that surface, the movements of the mind. Nirodha. Nirodha means stilling or calming, regulating, bringing balance to. Now, Satchidananda in this book tells us it means restraint. I always like to caution my students here because our mind is sort of like a reckless child. And if you have any experience with children and they are, for example, throwing a temper tantrum, and you don't want them to be throwing a temper tantrum, so you try to restrain them, what happens? They freak out even more, right? So your attempt to restrain was actually kicking yourself in the foot because it's making it worse. And so the mind is the same way. If we attempt to restrain our mind, then it's going to actively spit out more and more and more thoughts. And if you try meditation, and try to restrain the mind, then maybe you have a good idea of this. You've ever sat down and said, okay, I'm going to have a quiet, calm mind. Be quiet, mind. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. And the more you tell it to stop, the more you try to restrain it, the more active it gets, the more active and lively it gets, right? So I like to use that caution that we're not here to restrain the mind, okay? Yoga is, it is a state of a still mind, but it's also the process of reducing the number of thoughts that you're having, okay? So it's important that we know, because when we restrain, we may shove, right? We may ignore that child that's like, hey, excuse me, no, not right now, right? And we push it deeper into our body, and then what happens is later it comes out as an illness or tripping over our feet or something like that, right? So then what is yoga according to Patanjali, according to the Yoga Sutras? Yoga is calming the movements of the mind, stilling the fluctuations or the revolutions of the mind. So what is yoga? Yoga is a calm mind. The Bhagavad Gita says yoga is evenness of mind, unaffected by the dualities of pain and pleasure, of sickness, of health, unaffected by those dualities. So this is yoga. Great. What happens then when the mind is calm? Okay, so the next sutra talks about that. So when the vrittis have been nirodhad, when the movements of the mind have been stilled, then what? Well, ta-da! Then the seer is the Purusha, okay, the consciousness, the soul, the Atman, all the same thing, just different words. Then the seer abides in its own true nature. And so that meditation that we did earlier was in order to help you separate from an identification with your mind and settle into the space of the seer. Because when you can see what's happening within the mind, you settle into that space as the seer, as the self with a capital S. Okay? So what happens when the mind is calm? Then the seer abides in its own true nature. So nothing's happening to the seer, nothing's changing. Remember, Purusha is changeless, it's permanent, right? Nothing's changing there. But we can see, because we've gotten out our Windex and we've sprayed the mirror of our mind, right? We wipe down the mirror of our mind, and we can see clearly ourselves for what we truly are, the Atman, the Brahman, okay? So the seer abides in its own true nature, without any coloring of thought, without any coloring of judgment, of attachment, of aversion, of ego, of identification with this separate form, this illusion of a separate form. Well, what about when the mind is not calm? Okay, then what happens? So Sutra 4 tells us, at other times, the self appears to assume the form of the mental modification. So we appear to be the mind. And if you've ever spiraled into a thought process, and when I say spiral, it could be spiraling into anxiety or depression or doubt, but it could also be, spiraling into some kind of felt sense of pleasure after attaining something, right? Maybe like a new relationship or something like that. Then whatever our thought patterns are at that time, we identify with, right? That's why one minute we're on top of the world, we're joyful, we're happy, we're exuberant, and then the next minute, I am depressed. And we attach that to ourselves too. Just listen to the language, right? I am happy or I am sad, right? And we become that thought, okay? And so if we're going to calm these mental modifications, we have to understand their nature, okay? And so Patanjali then breaks down the different types of thoughts that we can have. And for purposes of this sort of shorter discussion about the Yoga Sutras, I'm going to kind of summarize it, but he covers it in Sutra 1.5 through 1.11. So if you have the book, and you can reference Sutra 5 through Sutra 11 of Book 1, talk about the different types of vrittis, or the different types of thoughts that you can have, that one can have. So the first thing is he categorizes these thoughts. So they can either be selfish or selfless. Selfish thoughts are going to bring pain and suffering. Selfless thoughts are for the highest good of all and result in no pain. They are painless. So selfish thoughts are painful. Selfless thoughts are painless. Why doesn't he tell us painful and pleasurable? Well, because pleasurable experiences, if there's some attachment to those experiences, then when we lose that experience, because remember, everything in this material world is ephemeral. It's going to go away, right? This wall may seem really sturdy right now, but over time, it will be destroyed, right? That representation of Shiva, the power of destruction, right? Everything in the material world is going to change. And so even our pleasurable thought, right? Our pleasurable, this new relationship, or I love this new car, or whatever it is, if there's attachment to it, so for example, if that thing that's causing the pleasure goes away, then causes pain and suffering, then there's attachment. So even pleasurable experiences with attachment can bring pain. That's not to say that you can't experience pleasure and experience joy, for after all, we're here to experience the whole range of human emotion. But notice when there's an attachment to it, okay? So thoughts can either be painful or painless. They can either be selfish or selfless. So now, furthermore, they can be divided into 5 categories according to Patanjali. Okay? So they're all of 2 types, selfish or selfless. And then again, they're divided to 5 subcategories. Okay? The first one is truth or right knowledge. Okay? Right knowledge is based on fact. It's based on truth. Okay? It's seeing something for what it is. Okay? It could be direct experience or scriptural testimony, like these wisdom teachings that we receive. But it is right knowledge. So it is selfless thought. Okay, it is aklishta. It is selfless, painless, because it's understanding ourselves as the Atman, as the Brahman. Okay, that's right knowledge. The next type of thought of vritti or the next type of vritti that we can experience is misconception. Misconception is identifying something for what it's not. Okay? So taking something that's not true to be true. All right? That's our fundamental ignorance is, taking ourselves to be only this limited body and mind, and not the higher Brahman. Okay, so we have truth, we have misconception, then we have imagination. So imagination is just what it sounds, right? Something with no, imagining something with no factual evidence. Okay, then the next one that we'll talk about is memory. And so the vritti of memory is very interesting because it's going to be convoluted and mixed with the other 3 that we've talked about before. Okay, so memory, these vrittis will mix with memory and they'll come back up. Most of our thoughts are thoughts that we've had before anyways. So this is the vritti memory. There's a 5th type that Patanjali identifies, which is nidra or sleep. And why he brings that up as a vritti is because it is possible to stay conscious even during sleep. And that's the practice of Yoga Nidra, which is a whole nother course. But Yoga Nidra is being conscious even in the unconscious realm, even in that state of deep, dreamless sleep. Okay, so we have these five categories. Okay, so for now, we're not going to talk about sleep because what we are generally aware of is our conscious, analytical monkey mind that's constantly going, and that's really what we're interested in calming. If you're interested in getting into the unconscious and even subconscious layers, I do really recommend that you practice Yoga Nidra. And if you're looking for a good teacher, my favorite teacher is Tanis Fishman. You can find her on Insight Timer, as well as her website, School of Sankalpa. So I'm going to leave that one for now and talk about the other 4. So there's a great analogy to understand these 4. So a man walks into a dark room. He sees something coiled up in the corner and immediately starts hyperventilating. Oh my gosh, his hands are sweating. He's freaking out. There's a snake in the corner of the room. Oh my gosh, it's probably going to bite me. It's probably venomous. He flips on the light, sees that it's just a rope coiled up in the corner of the room. And so the understanding here then is, okay, now we have right knowledge, right? The rope is a rope. Misconception, the rope is a snake. Okay? Imagination, he's standing outside of the room and his mom told him that snakes love to live in dark rooms, just like this one, right? So he already knows that there's snakes in there. right? And you can see how this can kind of happen with our thought patterns, right? Tomorrow I have a presentation, okay? First of all, tomorrow doesn't exist yet. So we already know we're in imagination, right? I remember last time I had a presentation, I totally botched it. I did a terrible job memory, right? I just suck at public speaking, okay? Misconception, right? Because if the source of all is inside of you, then you have the power to do anything. You have the ability and the strength to do anything. And so you can kind of see how these thoughts can sort of be interwoven and convoluted. But I challenge you to use these and begin watching your mind, and especially when the mind is feeling agitated, especially when the mind is experiencing some of these limiting beliefs, those thoughts that are sort of on replay, like a broken record in your mind. I'm not good enough, or I'm an anxious person, or I'm a shy person, or whatever it is. And these programs that are so programmed in your mind that sometimes you don't even realize that they're there, and you're missing opportunities. You're not getting the results that you want to get in your life because of these unconscious programs. Start paying attention. And pay attention the moment a thought arises, and use your Vijnana Maya, your intellect body, to say, first of all, is this selfish or selfless, right? Is this going to cause pain? If I were to take this thought process and keep riding it, is it going to lead to pain? Or can I fork off in another direction? Okay? And so this is the part of book 1 that I find really helpful. And 2 more things in book 1 before we get into the 8 limbs of yoga, and then that'll be sort of it for today. After we've looked at the way that the mind can move, Patanjali gives us the 2 most important keys. And this is one other thing that I forgot to mention about the sutra style of text, is when there's a list of things, whatever's listed first is of the utmost importance, okay? So what is the very first key that Patanjali lists and gives us? He gives us this word, abhyasa. Abhyasa. Abhyasa means, you take the etymology of the word, to sit again and again facing the goal. What's the goal? Chitta vritti nirodha, the state of yoga. That's the goal. So we've clumsily translated that to English as practice, okay? And the type of practice we're talking about here is not just the times when we sit on our mat, when we sit in stillness and in silence and we commune with God. No, it's not just then. But the practice is the moment-to-moment practice of sitting again and again and again facing the goal, especially during the challenging times, especially during the times when you are agitated, you are irritated, when you're suffering, right? Those are the times that abhyasa becomes very, very important. And we take those times of suffering and we use them for our spiritual purification. That's abhyasa. Okay? So he says you can calm these mental modifications by abhyasa. And abhyasa is that steadiness of mind. And then one other thing I'll point out here is, how often do I have to practice, right? So I think as students, we get hung up on this, right? Do I need to practice for 30 minutes? Do I need to practice for an hour? How long should my sun salutations last? And how long should my, shavasana be? And things like this. We get very hung up on this. And Patanjali's answer to this question is wonderfully vague. He says, practice becomes firmly grounded when well attended to for a long time, without any break, and in all earnestness. Okay, so just keep swimming, 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 and do your best, and have faith, right? And that's the earnestness, right? Because it's practice is not just when you're on your mat. Practice is especially when someone has said something that pissed you off. That is your practice. That is your yoga, right? Or you're told to stay at home and there's a threat of being ill, right? This is the practice. What's happening in my mind when my habitual patterns are shaken, when my expectations about life are not fulfilled? What's happening in my mind then? Is my mind even and calm then? Or am I being pulled by these dualities, these attachments to the way I think life should be, and these aversions to the way I think life shouldn't be? I have to stay away from that. This is awful, right? So practice. And then the other key he gives us here is non-attachment. Vairagya is non-attachment. And so non-attachment is freedom from craving things in the material world. Okay, so these desires in the material world, it's freedom from that. And so my teacher says that non-attachment, vairagya, is the same as saying maturity, which I really love because, if we think about the physical body and how we stay attached to that, oh my gosh, there's wrinkles happening, let me get my wrinkle cream, and my hair's turning gray, I need to dye it. I'm fighting and I'm holding on to something that's constantly changing, right? I need this fancy car, I need this, designer dress, or, the latest, yoga pants, or whatever it is, right? All of these attachments. And so as we become more and more mature, we realize that all of those things, they come and go, right? The color of our hair, the fairness of our skin, the money to buy the name brand clothes, or whatever it might be. So as we gain maturity, we start to understand the nature of the material world as being impermanent, as constantly changing. And so what is the result is non-attachment. And supreme non-attachment, by the way, is the highest form of yoga, the highest samadhi, right? No longer attached to that stuff. Okay. So from here, the rest of book 1 goes a little bit more into what samadhi is and the higher levels of samadhi. So this is more of an advanced understanding, someone who has already experienced this. But I'm going to move into the 8 limbs of yoga now, because that's really the heart of what you need to be understanding at this 200-hour level. Okay, so remember, book 2 is for the beginning practitioner. Book 2 is really geared towards someone who is very externally focused, someone who is attached to the material world and identified with the physical body and mind. And it is outlining the techniques to begin to bring ourselves inward, right? Because it's by going inward that we understand the true nature of reality. We're always seeking outward to relieve our suffering or to find our joy or to find our happiness. But yoga says, no, it's nothing out there is going to decrease your suffering. It's all in here. So we go inward. And so book 2, the beginning part is giving us techniques to begin to go inward. Okay. So the 8 limbs of yoga are presented in Sutra 2.28 is when he first starts talking about it. So Sutra 28 of book 2, it says, by the practice of the limbs of yoga, the impurities dwindle away and there dawns the light of wisdom, leading to discriminative discernment. Discerning between what's real and what's not real, what's constantly changing and what's not changing. Okay? And so then the next sutra, 29, lists the 8 limbs of yoga. And I have a little song for you to help remember the 8 limbs of yoga. My teacher in my first training taught me this. It's how he teaches kids to remember the 8 limbs of yoga, and it has always stuck, and I've shared it with all of my students, so I'll share it with you as well. So it's to the tune of Alouetta, and it goes like this. Yama niyama asana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhi. Yama niyama asana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhi. Sing with me one more time. Yama niyama asana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhi. So hopefully that'll help you to remember the 8 limbs as well. And as we sort of look at an overview of the 8 limbs, I'll just point out that the first 4 are considered the external limbs, and the last 4 are considered the internal limbs. And these are not to be taken as steps necessarily, like you do this before you do that. Now, in some cases, having a supple body obviously makes it easier to sit in meditation. So some are sort of like prerequisites. However, the word anga means limb. Okay, so it's like if you didn't have one of your limbs, life would be more challenging, right? And it's not like first you use this limb, then you use the next limb, and then you use the next limb. As a baby, you use all your limbs to crawl, and then to walk, you're pushing up and you're holding on to things, right? So know that the 8 limbs of yoga are to be taken as an integrated whole. Now that being said, the last 3 are really the point of Raja Yoga. They really are the point of Patanjali's teaching, and they are essentially meditation and meditative absorption. So we'll go one by one through the limbs. So yama means control. So you can think of the yamas and let's talk about both, the yamas and the niyamas. So sometimes they're compared to the 10 commandments, but they're not meant to be taken that way. They're meant to be taken as principles for living. They're meant to be taken as, with the practice of yoga, these principles will naturally come into your being. Okay, so it's not like you have to practice these or you're not a yogi. You're going to yoga hell. It's more like, these are the qualities of a yogi. And so as you practice yoga and as your level of sensitivity increases, these principles will fall into your way of being, okay? So yama means control. And you can think of the yamas as sort of like external regulations, okay? How we interact with our environment, with our surroundings, okay? And again, remember that these are listed in order of importance. So the first yama sets the tone for the rest of the yamas and the niyamas. The first yama is ahimsa. And so ahimsa means harm, and the prefix a means without. So ahimsa means non-harm. So I'm talking about the yamas. There are 5 yamas, and the first of those is ahimsa, non-harm. Okay? So to one established in non-violence, all hostilities will cease. So ahimsa is connected to and impossible to separate from the rest of the yamas and niyamas. not causing harm. Okay? And what do we mean here? So not causing harm to each other, not causing harm to the animals, not causing harm to the environment, not causing harm to the self, because after all, everything is a reflection, everything is a manifestation of Brahman, and so are you. So why would you hurt yourself, right? So ahimsa, non-violence, non-harm. The next yama is satya, which means truth. Okay, so to one established in truthfulness, actions and results become subservient. What does that mean? It means that we act in a karma yoga way. So we act without any expectation of a result. Every action is a selfless action for and because of our knowledge of the higher truth, right? So truth, satya, and in the teachings, I think it's worthy to mention here is when to speak the truth. Okay, there's sort of three criteria for when to speak the truth. Number one, is it based on fact? Number two, does it benefit the listener? And number three, is it spoken pleasantly? So before you speak, you can sort of run these three criteria through your mind. Is it based on truth? Is it spoken for the other person's benefit? And is it spoken pleasantly, right? So, did you hear that Johnny slept with Susie? Oh my gosh. Was I there? Did I see Johnny sleep with Susie? Is it a fact? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Are you going to benefit somehow by me telling you this information? Well, maybe if you're Johnny's girlfriend, but that's a whole other story. And then is it spoken pleasantly, right? Oh my gosh, did you hear? Not necessarily, right? So this is sort of nice criterion for how and when to speak our truth. Okay, the third yama then is astya. Astya is non-stealing. And I love in Satyananda's commentary here, he sort of opens our mind to what stealing could mean, because probably most of us are not running to the corner store and swiping candy bars from the shelves or anything like that anymore. But non-stealing in the sense of are you in a full state of presence and appreciation of every moment? So he says, receive each breath with reverence and use it to serve others. I just think that's so beautiful because we can steal even the breath. When we're not paying attention, we're not conscious of the fact that these beautiful trees around us are producing this oxygen, and what would the trees be without the sun and the soil and all of the things, all of the elements, right? And so when we receive the breath with reverence, we receive it with appreciation, and appreciation is just gratitude in action, right? It's gratitude in action, the action of being grateful, right? So you can also steal time, right? So if you're late somewhere, if you have a meeting with someone and you arrive late, or you arrive but you're not paying attention, like have you ever been sitting with a friend or a spouse or something and they're talking to you about something that's really important, but you're thinking about something that seems more important at that time to you? This is stealing, right? This is stealing their time, not fully present, in a state of presence. So this is astya. The next yama is brahmacharya. Brahmacharya literally means to walk with Brahman. Okay. Now, historically, it is abstinence, and there's a lot of talk about preserving the sexual fluids and conserving the energy of the sexual fluids, and then using that as your fuel to know God, or to meditate and to practice, and so on and so forth. And so if we look at it in the sense of, of sex and of abstinence, my teacher's master, when speaking to young people, they would say, okay, well, what about brahmacharya? You're a householder yogi. You have children. What about brahmacharya? How do we practice this? And he would respond by saying, when you're having sex, have it. And when you're not, don't. Simple as that. Be in a state of presence with whatever you're doing. So if you're here listening to this lecture right now, but you're smelling, I don't know, someone cooking brownies or something, and your mind is going over there, then you're using your vital energy to go somewhere else. Or you're thinking about, that hot guy that you saw the other day, right? Then you're using your vital energy on something else, and you're not in a state of presence. So conserving the energy in a state of presence, where everything we do is in service to that higher knowledge, brahmacharya. Okay, aparigraha means non-greed. So aparigraha can mean non-possessiveness, non-greed, non-hoarding. Aparigraha is like minimalism, not taking more than you need, not taking more of someone's time than you need, not taking more resources than you need, not taking more of any material thing than what you really need, right? So this is a parigraha, non-greed, minimalism, taking just enough for your survival and for your spiritual practice. Then moving, so those are the 5 yamas. Okay, so we have ahimsa, we have satya, we have astya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. Okay, so those are the 5 yamas. Now there's 5 niyamas, and the niyamas are like the personal observances. So these are the sort of the ways that we treat ourselves. Okay, the personal sort of observations. Okay, personal observances. So the first niyama is saucha. Saucha means purity. So saucha is looking at everything that we're taking into our body through the prana vayus. If you've learned the vayu of prana is bringing information into the body, bringing prana into the body through one of the 5 senses. So when we think of purification, we normally go right to, okay, eating healthy, clean food, drinking lots of water, not smoking, not indulging too much in alcohol or sugar or those types of things. But saucha also means purifying all of the senses, because it's our senses that bring us into the external world. And so by purifying these channels, we're able to bring the senses inward and focus on our highest reality. So saucha is purity. Pay attention to what you're listening to, the people you're surrounding yourself with, the things that you're watching. Are you binging on Netflix that has, violent scenes? Are you reading these like entertainment type of magazines and things like that? Notice what you're putting into your awareness through the senses. Saucha. Okay. Then we have santosha, which is contentment. Santosha is lovely because we can no longer blame anyone external for the source of our suffering, because we have a well of joy and a well of bliss inside. And contentment is recognizing that. that we always have that inside. Santosha, contentment. Then we have tapas, which is self-discipline. It's the fire of self-discipline that burns away the impurities. Tapas is using pain and using suffering for our purification. So it's like what I was talking about when we were talking about abhyasa. Those times of pain, those times of suffering, when we can use those as our practice and we can feel them fully and offer them to the divine, offer them to the sacred fire, and burn them through our practice, because we're practicing coming into an even state of mind where we're not affected by those dualities. So that's tapas. Svadhyaya is it's the study of the self. So it's the study of spiritual or sacred texts to understand the self with a capital S, Svadhyaya. And then we have Ishvara Pranidhana. Remember that I mentioned that Patanjali introduces the concept of God, where Sankhya philosophy left it out. So Ishvara is meaning God. It's meaning the highest Purusha, the omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-present soul. Okay, it's the God, it's the Brahman, the thing that goes through everything. And so Ishvara Pranidhana is surrender to that. Now, if the God word doesn't feel good for you, you can say surrender to consciousness, or one from a teacher called Muji that I really like is the isness. Surrender to the isness. Surrender to what is, because by fighting what is insanity, right? So just surrendering. If there's something you can do to change the situation, change it. But if it is out of your control, surrender. And that's what Ishvara Pranidhana is about. Okay, then so yama, niyama, asana. Asana, Sthira Sukham Asanam, Sutra 46 of Book 2 is going to be a very important sutra for you to understand. It says asana is a steady and easy posture. Now, if we look at the first time the asanas were written down in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, only about 15 were written down, and they were all focused on bringing the practitioner to be able to sit in stillness. And later we developed more of these asanas to sort of push and squeeze the toxins out of our body so that we could sit. Okay? So Sthira Sukham Asanam. Have you ever been in an asana that didn't feel steady and easy? Where the breath was shortened or labored? Okay? Those are the times that we've stopped doing yoga and we've started doing gymnastics. So noticing that asana, Sthira Sukham Asanam, it is steady and it is comfortable. Okay? Also about asana, Patanjali says that we lessen the natural tendency for restlessness. Oh, good. It's our natural tendency to be restless. And meditate on the infinite. Then we've mastered the posture. And then we're no longer disturbed by duality. Next up is pranayama. Yama is control. Prana is life force, controlling the life force in our body. And Patanjali says, how is that controlled? Well, it's controlled by space. Where in the body is the prana? By time. So how long is our inhale? How long is our exhale? And by number. How many rounds of breath are we doing? This is pranayama. Then we have pratyahara. And pratyahara is sense withdrawal. So it's gathering up all the sense information and bringing it inward to focus on the one true self, the Atman, the goal of yoga. And once we're able to go within, and by the way, Yoga Nidra is a pratyahara practice. So once we're able to go within, then we're ready for the internal limbs. And the last three limbs are then presented in the first three sutras of Book 3. Okay, they are dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Dharana is concentration with effort. Has your teacher ever said concentrate on the breath? And then you went, oh my gosh, did I remember to feed the cat? Oh yeah, the breath. Ooh, I wonder if we need to buy milk on the way home. Oh yeah, the breath, right? This is the effort that's required to keep bringing yourself back to your point of focus, dharana. Dhyana is when now there is a continuous flow of cognition towards that object. This is true meditation. So then from dhyana, we may slip into samadhi. Now, remember I said these are all meant to be taken as an integrated whole, but these three are going to follow a progression. And every practice we do is focused on coming to a state of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Samadhi is meditative absorption. It's when the subject and the object become one. Okay? So the meditation can become samadhi when there is, so let's say, for example, I'm concentrating on this water bottle, right? Okay, so there's a subject, me, the object, the water bottle. This is my one point of focus, right? Dharana. Oh yeah, focus. Dhyana, totally focused. And then samadhi is me and the water bottle become one. There's no longer a subject and a separate object. There's no longer a separation. The word samadhi means to gather the mind from all outside things and focus it inward. So there's two things happening. There is a gathering inward, and there is a focusing, and then there is an absorption into that focus. That is samadhi, and that is yoga. And Satchidananda tells us, it's when you and God become one. It is the meditative absorption. It is maybe you can call the enlightenment. Now, there are different levels of samadhi. But for purposes of this class, we can say, the highest form of samadhi, the highest level of samadhi is the point of yoga. Okay. Come to my time. I'm sorry I got fast there at the end. I realized I was running short. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to type into the comment section here? Well, if you have any questions, please comment them here. And the next time I teach you guys, I can begin with answering some of those questions, because it was a lot of information sort of packed into a really short period of time. And I do tend to get talking very fast. So if you have questions for me, please leave them here, or you can send me a message through the Facebook Messenger, and I'll address any questions when I see you guys again. So sit comfortably, sit up straight, settle your body, and we'll close with the closing Shanti mantra. Oh, thank you, Katie. I just saw your message. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sticking it all the way through. I love sharing this nerdy philosophy stuff. It's my favorite. All right, so sit up straight, and we'll do the closing Shanti mantra. Again, call and response. Bring your hands to your heart. I'll say the verse, and then I'll repeat it, and you can repeat it along with me. Sing it loud and proud. Don't worry if you mess up the words. If you don't know the mantra, this is the time to practice your Vishuddha, your throat chakra. This is the time. Connect the thumbs to the heart. Turn the gaze inward. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamiva Vashishyate Purnamiva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on this path. Thank you for your practice, for your dedication.